No one expected a wild wolf to become a guardian angel, but when a lone wolf encounters a blind child at twilight, what happens next will break your heart and rebuild your faith. In the fading glow of dusk, the forest path stretched silent beneath a lavender sky. Young Tomas, blind since birth, sat on a moss-covered log, hands trembling as he tried to follow the echo of his mother's distant voice. His small frame shivered in the evening chill. He had wandered farther than he realized, chasing the laughter of woodland birds he could no longer see. At that moment, a soft rustle drifted from the undergrowth. Tomas froze, every sense alert to the forest's hidden rhythms. Then emerged a wolf, silver-gray fur glistening with dew, eyes a deep amber that caught the last light. Tomas had never seen a wolf, but he felt its presence in the pulse of the earth and the hush of the air. Had the boy cried out, the wolf might have fled or attacked. Instead, it halted a few paces away, nostrils flaring as it sniffed the air. Then, with a gentleness that belied its wild nature, it padded forward and pressed its cold muzzle against Tomas's hand. The boy's breath caught, a creature of legend, offering solace instead of fear. How did the wolf know Tomas was alone and vulnerable? What compelled it to protect a human child in this hidden forest clearing? And what dangers still lurked in the shadows? Dangers only the wolf could sense. As night deepened, the boundaries between human and animal blurred. Tomas, guided by the wolf's soft nudge, began an extraordinary journey through the forest's heart, a journey of trust, courage, and the silent languages that bind all living beings. In this tale of unlikely friendship, every step carries a question. Will the wolf lead Tomas safely home, or will the darkness trap them both in its embrace? And in that haunting moment when danger strikes, what sacrifice will the wolf make to save a blind boy it barely knows? At 9 years old, Tomas moved through the world by sound and scent. Living on the forest's fringe with his mother, he had never known sight, but his other senses were honed to a razor's edge. He could name every bird call, wood thrush, ovenbird, hermit thrush, as though reading Braille on the breeze. He could follow deer trails by the musk of antler velvet. Yet that evening, the forest's usual symphony felt ominously empty, as though holding its breath. His mother, Marta, had gone ahead to gather wild chanterelles near the creek, leaving Tomas a few paces behind to feel the forest at dusk. But he hadn't heard her return. The whispers of wind through spruce needles and the distant rush of water offered little guidance in the gathering gloom. A chill crept through his woolen jacket, and uncertainty curled in his chest. He was alone. Tomas's small hand gripped the mossy log as he called out, voice quavering, "Mama!" The bark's damp roughness pressed against his palm. No answer, only the hush between the trees. Fear fluttered in his chest, but he had learned to steady himself. With careful steps, he rose, toes curling against the soft earth, and began toward the path he had trodden with confidence hours ago. Suddenly, a low growl rumbled through the underbrush. Tomas froze, breath catching. His heart pounded like a drum. A wolf's growl, close, resonant, neither playful nor immediately hostile. He pressed back against the log, hands trembling, mind racing through every story ever told. Tales of wolves tearing at flesh, shadows in the night, and yet, beneath the growl, he sensed something unexpected. Hesitation. A movement in the dim light sketched a silver shape. A wolf stepped into view, fur silver-gray and thick as winter frost. Tomas dared not flee. His cane lay useless at the log's base. The wolf's amber eyes locked onto his, inscrutable but unblinking. Tomas's pulse thundered, and he tasted bile. Every instinct screamed to run, but his feet remained rooted. Then, astonishingly, the wolf lowered its head in a cautious bow, tail swishing in measured arcs. It padded forward, nostrils flaring, scenting Tomas's fear and curiosity alike. At arm's length, it halted and pressed its cold nose to Tomas's outstretched hand. The shock of fur and warmth beneath its coat sent a jolt through him. He gasped, whispering, "You're not here to hurt me." The wolf made no sound, only leaned into the touch, as though seeking reassurance. Tomas's fear receded, replaced by wonder. What are you?" he stammered. The wolf cocked its head, ears flicking at the rustle of leaves. Alert to dangers Tomas could not hear, a distant crack, branches snapping under heavy weight. The wolf's body tensed, hackles rising. It emitted a low, vibrating warning. Threat, the boy realized. He glanced toward the creek where shadows moved between trunks. Could it be a hunting party? Poachers? Wild boar? His mind flitted through possibilities, none comforting. The wolf spun, leading Tomas away from the unseen threat. Each step was sure and deliberate. Tomas followed, toes crunching pine needles, heartbeat syncing with the wolf's steady rhythm. He reached for his mother's scarf looped around his neck, her scent anchoring him, and whispered, "Lead me home." Their path wove beneath towering pines, the wolf always glancing back, as though inviting Tomas to trust. Shadows lengthened, branches scratching the undergrowth, but the wolf never faltered. Twice, it halted at narrow ledges and silent streams, sniffing the air, then chose a safer route. Calculations that would shatter any notion of wild animal as mindless predator. At one turn, a sudden breeze carried a more urgent sound, a woman's muffled sob. Tomas perked his ears. "Mama!" he cried. The wolf stiffened, then bounded forward. Tomas stumbled, but caught the wolf's thick pelt as it circled back. With its flank guiding him, he stayed upright. They emerged into a moonlit glade, where Marta knelt beside a fallen log, clutching her ankle. She winced, the pain radiating through the cool night air. Relief flooded Tomas, but fear gripped him anew. Marta's decisions, picking mushrooms off the beaten path, had led to this sprain. Tomas wanted to run to help, but his cane lay behind him. The wolf nudged his side, urging Tomas onward. He pressed a hand to Marta's shoulder. "Mama, I'm here." She looked up, tear-streaked and bewildered by the wolf. "Oh, Toma, God, you're safe." She reached for him, but the wolf positioned itself between them and the trees, hackles raised. Marta gasped. "He's protecting you." She studied the wolf's silhouette, broad shoulders, thick neck, alert posture, and understood. "Thank you," she whispered, stroking the wolf's flank. The wolf's answer was a soft exhale, breath visible in the chill. A distant echo carried on the wind, voices and torches bobbing between trunks, poachers searching for game. Marta's face blanched, Tomas's stomach knotted. The wolf emitted a low menace, and Tomas realized it would not rest until they were truly safe. He grasped his mother's uninjured arm. "Let's go this way." The wolf reversed direction, leading them back along the path they had originally taken, but swifter and surer, weaving around brambles that would snag human legs. With each step, Tomas felt the wolf's confidence infuse him. His fear of the dark, of unseen eyes watching, transformed into trust. He stumbled on a root, and the wolf paused, waiting. When he stood, the animal nudged him gently, encouraging his progress. As they neared the edge of the forest, the wolf slowed, watching Marta's lantern glow in the distance. Tomas paused, realizing their guide would not cross the final threshold. He crouched, voice thick. "Thank you." The wolf's head dipped, amber eyes soft, then it turned and melted back into the pines without a sound. Marta stumbled forward to embrace her son, tears falling freely. Tomas held his mother close, heart pounding with gratitude and awe. He whispered, "A wolf saved me." Marta stroked his hair, eyes wide. "I don't know what we'd have done without him." Behind them, unseen but ever present, the wolf watched from the shadows, guardian of a boy who could not see, but had witnessed kindness in its purest form. The next morning, light slanted through Tomas's bedroom window as he lay in bed, head still buzzing with memories of the wolf's silent guidance. His mother, Marta, had insisted he sleep late, tending to his scraped knee and comforting the storm of emotions swirling in his heart. Though safe at home, Tomas felt restless, haunted by the absence of the creature who had saved them. Below, Marta packed fresh bandages and a thermos of tea. She glanced at her son's empty bed and sighed. "You'll be fine today," she said aloud, though her voice quavered. The accident had left her shaken. Guilt gnawed at her for having led Tomas into danger. She resolved to tell the village elder the full story, but feared no one would believe her. Wolves were pests to be driven off, not guardians to be thanked. By mid-morning, The forest clearing where they'd been rescued had drawn a small crowd. News of the blind boy saved by a wolf spread like wildfire. Neighbors gathered at the trailhead, speaking in hushed, awed tones. "He must be a spirit animal," one whispered. Another shook his head. "Unscrupulous hunters will come looking for that wolf now." Marta arrived, Thomas at her side, to set the record straight. They met Elder Marcello, a stooped man with silver hair and kind eyes, at the edge of the crowd. He studied Thomas's scraped knee and Marta's baying heart. "Show us where it happened," he said gently. Thomas hesitated, then guided his mother and Marcello into the trees, retracing each step, past the mossy log, through the narrow ledge, to the moonlit glade where the wolf had appeared. At each waypoint, he described the animal's movements, the way it had nuzzled his hand, the protective stance it had taken when danger approached. Marcello listened, nodding gravely. When Thomas finished, the elder placed a hand on Marta's shoulder. "The wolf is no spirit," he said. "He is a once-forgotten guardian of these woods. We owe him nothing less than our respect." He turned to the onlookers. "Let this be a lesson. When nature shows mercy, we must return it with care." A murmur of agreement rippled through the villagers, and some even crossed themselves as if receiving a blessing. Still, not everyone was convinced. A group of hunters arrived, rifles slung, rifles gleaming in the sun. One hefted his weapon and spat. "That beast is a killer. It's only a matter of time before it turns on a child who can't flee." Thomas's heart lurched. "It already saved my life," he said, voice firm despite his fear. The hunter sneered. "Children don't know better." Marta stepped between them. "It saved my son. If you harm it, you harm us both." The hunters exchanged glances, uncertain whether to scoff or lower their rifles. That afternoon, news of the encounter reached the local press. By evening, a television crew had set up cameras outside Marta's cottage, eager for an exclusive interview. Thomas recoiled at the bright lights, clutching his mother's hand. The reporter, pen poised, asked dramatic questions. "Do you fear wolves more now, or respect them?" Marta answered with composure. "I respect them more than ever." Thomas added softly. "He guided me home when I couldn't see." The cameras clicked, capturing his words and the wolf's legend for the hungry masses. Meanwhile, high in the forest, the wolf, whom Thomas had named Lumina for her silvery coat, watched the flickering lights of the village from a ridge. She had retreated under cover of dusk, unsure whether her act of compassion would bring danger or gratitude. Her amber eyes glowed with intelligence as she noted unfamiliar scents, torn camera straps, charred cigarette butts, and the pungent odor of gasoline from parked vans. The world of humans was shifting around her, and her pack, if it still existed, remained distant and unaccounted for. That night, Thomas lay awake, listening for the wolf's howl, but the forest was silent. He closed his eyes, tasting the phantom brush of fur against his hand, and wondered whether he would see Lumina again. At dawn, he slipped from his blankets, tiptoed past Marta, and crept downstairs. He retrieved the scarf Lumina had sniffed, still woven with her faint scent, and held it to his cheek, tears springing unbidden. Desperate to maintain their connection, he resolved to return to the clearing as soon as he was able. The following day, Thomas and Marta set out at first light, leaving word for the reporters and hunters that they were going into the forest. Armed only with a canteen of water and the scarf, Thomas climbed nimbly along the well-worn path. Marta stayed close, eyes darting between their steps and the rising sun's glare. They reached the mossy log, then the narrow ledge, and found something new. Paw prints in soft mud, one set small and delicate, close to a larger, sturdier print. Thomas knelt, fingers tracing the indentations. "She came back," he whispered. Overjoyed, he rose to call her name. "Lumina." His voice carried through the still air. Behind them, the crack of a twig snapped Thomas back to uncertainty. Marta gripped his arm. "Stay behind me," she whispered. They waited, breath held, until a familiar silver shape emerged from the undergrowth. Lumina stepped into the clearing, amber eyes locked on Thomas. The boy dropped to his knees and reached out. The wolf approached slowly, lowering her head to allow Thomas's hands onto her thick neck. Thomas buried his face in her fur. "I missed you," he murmured. Lumina closed her eyes, tilting her head to receive his embrace. Marta watched, tears in her eyes, grateful and wary at once. Suddenly, Lumina's ears pricked. She emitted a low, urgent growl and bounded to the edge of the clearing. Thomas and Marta followed her gaze to a shattered camera trap, its cable dangling, lens smashed. Beyond, a trapper's steel jaw snare, covered in fresh blood, lay hidden beneath leaves. Tomas's heart froze. "She's not alone," he said. Lumina paced, fur bristling. Marta's eyes widened. "They're hunting her," she realized. "We have to help." Tomas nodded bravely. "We'll set a decoy, distract them." Together, they gathered branches and leaves to conceal the snare's deadly jaws, then followed Lumina's trail to lure her away before rescuing any trapped creature. As twilight fell again, Thomas and Marta followed Lumina deeper into the forest than before, determined to protect her as she had protected him. The bond between blind child and wolf had evolved from rescue into mutual guardianship, and in the coming days, they would face their greatest test yet, confronting those who saw the wolf only as a threat, and proving that compassion could outpace fear, even in the darkest woods. Night had fallen by the time Thomas, Marta, and Lumina emerged from the forest's deeper shadows. The boy's heart pounded not just from fear, but from wonder. He trusted this wild creature completely, yet still didn't know why she had chosen him. Marta followed close, supporting her son's weight as he leaned on her side, every sense straining for sign of the wolf's next move. Lumina paused at the edge of a thicket, amber eyes fixed on a gnarly old oak. Thomas raised his cane, fingertips brushing the rough bark. He sensed a hollow where the trunk split low to the ground. The wolf nosed the opening and backed away, then looked at Tomas expectantly. "Inside?" Tomas asked, breath trembling. Marta knelt beside him and peered into the cavity. Her gasp cut through the nocturnal hush. Woven among tangled roots lay a cluster of small, pale mushrooms, their caps emitting a faint phosphorescent glow. Tomas reached forward and touched one. A soft warmth spread through his fingertip, and in that instant, the world shifted. Brilliant filaments of light shimmered across the mushrooms, pulsing like thousands of tiny lanterns in the dark. Thomas's other hand shot up to his face. Though he could not see with his eyes, he felt shapes dance across his skin, the gentle arcs of caps, the delicate ridges of gills. An entire universe mapped through touch and sensation. Lumina nuzzled his shoulder, as though guiding him into the grove's secret embrace. Thomas closed his eyes against tears, voice thick. "It's beautiful." Marta knelt beside him, slipping her fingers through the glow, awe softening her tones. "They're called ghost lanterns. The old stories say they reveal hidden paths to those who cannot see." In that moment, Thomas understood. Lumina had led them here not just to escape hunters, but to give him a gift, a moment of wonder no sighted person could claim. The mushrooms shimmered brighter as his tears fell, and the boy laughed through his sobs, feeling as though he could see for the first time. But the miracle held a price. As Thomas explored the grove's braided roots, Marta noticed another presence, faint paw prints in the soft earth beyond the lantern circle. One set was larger, more irregular than Lumina's prints. Another was smaller, as if belonging to a pup. A chill shifted through the grove, and the wolf stiffened, hackles rising. Thomas felt the tension and asked, "Is someone else here?" Lumina emitted a low whine and bounded toward the thicket's edge. Marta followed, calling Thomas to her side. Beyond the fungi-lit clearing, she saw them, two wolf pups, eyes glowing with curiosity and hunger. One was limping, its leg awkward under a crudely tied snare. The other stood guard, body coiled like a spring. Marta's heart clenched. "They're your family," she said to Lumina. The mother wolf dipped her head, growl rumbling deep in her chest. She inched forward to nudge the trapped pup, then darted back as Tomas and Marta emerged into sight. Tomas reached out, voice small but firm. "I can help." He stepped through the lantern light, hand tracing the pup's frail leg. The snare's wire bit into fur, and when he lifted it, the pup yelped. Marta gripped her son's sleeve. "Be careful." Guided by Lumina's expectant gaze, Thomas worked with astonishing dexterity. He found a sharp stone and sawed gently at the wire until it snapped. Blood seeped from the wound, and the pup licked its leg, stumbling away to nestle against its sibling. The adult wolf pressed her nose to Thomas's palm, eyes brimming with gratitude. In that charged stillness, Marta realized the true revelation. Lumina had not merely rescued a lost child, she had orchestrated a reunion, leading Thomas to become a savior in return. The cycle of kindness had turned. A blind boy had seen beauty through ghost lanterns and had freed 2 pups from human cruelty. A distant crack of twig alerted them. The poachers were close, but Thomas no longer felt helpless. He felt Lumina's strength coursing through him. He beckoned his mother, voice sure. "Let's lead them somewhere safe. This night belongs to us." Hand in hand, child and mother followed Lumina and her unsteady pup through a hidden exit of the grove, one revealed only by the faint glow of the mushrooms. As they vanished into the tree line, Marta slipped a protective arm around Thomas. He paused, fingers brushing the phosphorescent lichen clinging to bark, and whispered, "Thank you, friend." Behind them, Lumina stood watch over her family, the grove's ghostly lights fading as the pack vanished into the deeper forest. And in that vanishing, Thomas knew the world had opened itself in ways sight could never capture, a world where compassion illuminated the darkest paths and true vision sprang from the heart. Dawn's pale light filtered through Marta's kitchen window as she and Thomas sat at the table, the night's revelations heavy between them. Thomas traced the faint glow still lingering on his fingertips, ghost lantern spores clinging under his nails, a tactile reminder of Lumina's gift. Marta poured hot herbal tea, her hands trembling as she processed the enormity of their discovery. "Mama," Thomas began, voice soft but steady, "I've never felt anything so alive." He lifted his cup, feeling the warmth seep through the mug into his palms. "Lumina led me to the mushrooms, to her family. I helped them." His eyes, though sightless, shone with wonder. Marta exhaled slowly. "I know, mi amor. You saved them." She sipped the tea, letting the steam clear her thoughts. "We have to decide what to do next." Her gaze drifted to the window, where the forest stood dark and knowing. "We can't just leave them out there, vulnerable." Thomas nodded. "We need a plan to protect Lumina and her pups." He tapped the table, urgency in his tone, and to keep the hunters away from the grove. Marta set down her cup, resolve hardening. "You're right. I'll speak with Elder Marcello. He trusts your word now. Maybe he'll sanction a protected sanctuary." Later that morning, Marta approached the elder beneath the great oak in the village square. Marcello's lined face brightened when he saw them. "You found the lantern grove," he said. Thomas nodded, explaining how Lumina had guided them and the pup's plight under the snare. Marcello stroked his beard. "The forest spirits favor you, child. I will petition the council to designate the grove as sacred ground. No hunting or logging permitted." Relief washed through Marta. "Thank you," she whispered. Marcello placed a hand on her shoulder. "But words alone won't shield them. We must enlist the villagers." He turned to Tomas. "Will you speak at the full moon ceremony tonight and tell your story?" Tomas swallowed but nodded. Yes. By afternoon, word had spread. Farmers, woodcutters, and mothers with bairns gathered in the clearing. Tomas climbed onto a stump, Marta at his side. He felt the weight of dozens of eyes, skeptical, curious, compassionate, and steadied himself. "Last night," he began, "I wandered alone in the dark and met a wolf." His voice quavered at first but grew stronger. "She didn't harm me. Instead, she showed me a hidden grove of glowing mushrooms and led me to her pups, one of whom was caught in a trap. I freed them and they trusted me." He lifted his hands, imagining Lumina's silver fur. "If we make that place sacred, we'll keep them safe." A hush settled. Marta watched Marcello assess the crowd. His nod released them. One by one, voices rose in agreement. "Let the grove be ours and the wolves," called a forester. "My goats need water near there. I'll bring buckets from the creek so they don't stray," offered a shepherdess. A hunter, the same who had doubted, stepped forward, hands open. "I saw your courage, boy. I'll hang my rifles elsewhere. Wolves are kin of the wild. This grove stays." Chattering grew into consensus. The villagers would protect the grove. They formed a human chain around its perimeter that night, lanterns in hand, singing old forest hymns until the first moon touched their faces. Meanwhile, Tomas's village fame had attracted the local naturalist, Professor Elena Ruiz, who came bearing notebooks and cameras. She sought Marta's permission to study the ghost lanterns scientifically and assured them she would share findings with conservation bodies. Marta hesitated, torn between gratitude for protection and fear of exposing the grove to outsiders. That evening, at home, Marta voiced her doubts. "If you tell the world about the mushrooms, they'll flock here, and the hunters too." Tomas considered this, but Professor Ruiz can help us secure funding for a sanctuary. He tapped his scarf, warmed by Lumina's scent. "We need her knowledge to keep the grove secret and safe." Marta sighed, then nodded. "All right, but only with the villagers' blessing." At twilight, Tomas and his mother returned to the grove for a vigil of gratitude. The ghost lanterns glowed softly, and Lumina appeared at the thicket's edge, leading her pups out to join them. Tomas knelt, gently laying offerings of fresh water and mushrooms. Marta and 3 trusted villagers followed suit, quiet gestures of thanks. Professor Ruiz watched respectfully from the tree line, jotting notes. Later, she approached Marta. "These fungi are bioluminescent mycenas, rare and vulnerable. I know of a research grant for community-led conservation. With your permission, I'll apply on behalf of the village." Marta peered into the lantern glow. "If it means legal protection and Lumina's safety, yes." That night, Tomas lay awake, the forest's chorus drifting through his open window. He felt different, more attuned to the world around him, as if Lumina's presence had unlocked a door within his senses. He thought of the wolves, the villagers, and the promise of a protected grove. Though he could not see the future, he felt its shape in his bones, a path of guardianship stretching ahead. Marta sat by his bed, brushing his hair. "You did something extraordinary, Tomas." He reached for her hand. "We did it together." She kissed his forehead. "Yes, we did." Outside, somewhere in the woods, a lone wolf howled, a soft, melodic note of gratitude echoing across the night. In the days to come, villagers would erect discreet boundary markers, hunters would hang their rifles elsewhere, and researchers would plan studies that honored the forest's solitude. And through it all, a blind boy and a wild wolf would remain bound by an unspoken covenant, to see with their hearts and to protect life in all its forms. In the weeks after the full moon ceremony, Tomas and Marta believed the grove's fate was sealed, until new currents began to swirl around their sheltered hamlet. It started with a single photograph. Professor Ruiz's discreet nighttime shots of the ghost lanterns and Lumina's silhouette appeared in Natural Wonders Quarterly, captioned, "Forest Miracle, Boy and Wolf Defy Darkness." By dawn, online forums buzzed with envy and curiosity. A blogger posted GPS-adjacent coordinates, promising an ethereal spectacle for adventurous visitors. Within days, the village trailhead brimmed with day trippers in hiking boots and selfie sticks. Marta watched in dismay as crowds chattered under the canopy, trampling undergrowth and leaving litter. Tomas, who once reveled in the grove's hush, now winced at the crunch of boots on moss. Even at dawn, when the lanterns glowed faintly, flash cameras popped like firecrackers. Marta confronted Professor Ruiz beneath the big oak. "You promised respect," Marta said, voice tight. "Now half the county's here." Ruiz sighed, hands raised. "I warned them to keep to the outer trail, but once something goes public..." She patted Tomas's shoulder. "I'll speak with the editor. Ask them to remove the location. Meanwhile, we'll post clear no-entry notices." As media frenzy peaked, a delegation arrived from the Regional Forestry Commission. Led by Director Santoro, suits replaced wool coats and laptops over maps of logging concessions. Santoro praised the grove's tourism potential, then slid a contract across Marta's kitchen table. "We'd like to purchase 50 acres surrounding the oak and stream, build a boardwalk, gift shop, even a small lodge. The village council stands to gain substantial royalties." Marta's breath caught. "But the grove is sacred and home to Lumina's pact." Santoro's smile didn't waver. "We'll set aside a preservation zone, 50 meters in each direction." Beyond that, well, progress waits for no one. The number on the contract shimmered like a lure. Infrastructure funds, jobs for villagers, a modern clinic. Marta's heart ached at the thought of commodifying the grove, yet she knew the village needed investment. Back at school, Tomas faced his own pressures. His classmates whispered about the wolf boy, and teachers alternated between praise and concern. The headmistress called Marta in. Tomas's self-esteem is soaring, but his absences to guard the grove disrupt his studies. "We need consistency," Marta countered. "His connection to the forest has restored his confidence. He learns differently." The headmistress sighed. "I'll allow him one field trip per month, but home lessons must continue." Social services joined the chorus with home visit checklists. Is the cabin heated properly? Are there emergency plans if Tomas, or Lumina's pups, gets injured? Marta complied, but each inspection felt like a veiled threat. If you cannot guarantee his safety, we may have to re-evaluate guardianship. Meanwhile, Lumina's rescue ringed deeper in the forest. Camera trap footage at the grove's northern boundary revealed more than the once-seen pups. Another adult wolf, larger, coal-black, moving stealthily, watched from the shadows. Scientists initially thought it might be Lumina's mate, but closer analysis of gait and scent samples suggested an outsider, perhaps a rival pack's alpha. One morning, Jacob Lee rushed to Marta's cottage, breathless. "The black wolf's returned," he said, voice urgent, "but he's limping worse and several ribs look bruised." Marta exchanged a worried glance with Tomas. The black wolf had ventured near the boardwalk site. Perhaps skirmishes with human-fed deer or other packs drove him there. Without sanctuary status, he risked huntsmen's traps. That evening, the village council convened in the dim-lit social hall. Santoro presented his development plan. Ruiz defended the grove's scientific value. The headmistress spoke for Tomas's education, and Marta rose last. "I beg you, balance is possible. Protect the grove's core as a biological and cultural sanctuary. Invest in our school and clinic. Yes, but do not carve out our heritage for profit." Her hands trembled as she unclenched them. "Lumina saved my son. She and her pack guard our forest, our water. Will we guard them in return or sell them to the highest bidder?" A chorus of murmurs followed, and the black-clad director's smile faltered. Santoro cleared his throat. "I respect your passion, but we must consider the greater good." Marta nodded. "Then let the greater good include the wild spirits who saved us." That night, Tomas lay in bed, listening to distant owls. He thought of the gathering storm, tourists trampling moss, corporate plans chomping at the grove's edge, school demands yanking him from Lumina's side, and the black wolf's uncertain fate. Yet he also felt a swelling of hope. The villagers, hunters, and farmers alike had committed themselves to protect the grove. Professor Ruiz had the conservation grant in process. Even Santoro's ambition could be tempered with regulation. Under the cover of darkness, Tomas slipped outside. He carried a small lantern, its glow muted beside the phantom mushroom's luminescence. He followed the path to the grove, heart thumping. Lumina emerged, shadowed by the black wolf and two pups now grown sleek and strong. The pack gathered around him, eyes luminous and warm, as though in silent counsel. Tomas knelt, voice clear. "We won't let you down. We'll guard the grove, guard your home, guard each other." The wolves pressed close, breathing on his palms. He felt their trust like a promise woven between flesh and fur. Morning light found Marta kneeling by the kitchen table, reviewing contract clauses from Director Santoro, while Tomas traced ghost lantern spores on his scarf. Each clause promising village clinics and jobs felt like a double-edged dagger. Prosperity at the cost of the sacred grove's solitude. Marta's chest tightened as she recalled the villagers' pledge to protect the forest and the wolf who had saved her son. Across town, Professor Ruiz wrestled with her own conflict. The grant she championed could underwrite permanent sanctuary status, but only if she published exact fungi locations. She stared at her laptop, cursor hovering over the submit button. Would revealing the grove's coordinates secure legal protection or unleash floods of tourists that no barrier could hold at bay? At school that afternoon, Tomas faced the headmistress's gentle ultimatum: attend regular classes or risk academic penalties. The new homeschool arrangement offered field trips once a month, but Tomas felt torn. His heart yearned for Lumina's companionship in the grove, yet he knew his mother struggled to juggle work, his injuries, and the social services mandates. He could almost hear Lumina's soft nudge urging him back to the trees. That evening, Marta organized a meeting in the village hall. The room hummed with conflicting voices. Farmers worried about logging restrictions, innkeepers giddy at tourist dollars, parents anxious about road safety for children wandering near the grove. Thomas sat beside his mother, heart pounding as the hunters presented petition signatures demanding unfettered access to the woods. Marta rose, voice trembling with conviction. "We cannot have both the forest and the profit if we do not heed Lumina's lesson. Compassion must come first." She locked eyes with Santoro, who leaned back behind his polished briefcase. "Will you honor our covenant with the wild or reap rewards that profit short-term and destroy long-term?" The director's veneer cracked. He tapped his pen, then sighed. "Perhaps a compromise. We'll designate the inner 20-acre grove as inviolate and develop sustainable trails and eco-lodges on the perimeter. No motor vehicles, strict visitor caps." A ripple of relief swept the hall, but Thomas caught a flicker of doubt in Marta's eyes. Would 20 acres suffice to protect Lumina's expanding pack? Meanwhile, Jacob Lee and the veterinary team focused on the black wolf's healing. The wounds on his ribs had mended unevenly, and his limp sent pangs through the group. If he pushes too hard, he could re-injure it, warned Dr. Patel. Yet observing his siblings romping on slippery rocks, the black wolf's instinct to rejoin his pack was undeniable. Jacob studied the field pack's dynamics and proposed relocation to deeper forest territory, far from human intrusion, but risky to implant a lone wolf into unfamiliar packs. As dusk fell, Marta and Thomas hiked to the grove for their nightly vigil. Thomas's steps were more hesitant now. The previous ease had been supplanted by weighty decisions. "Mama," he whispered, "if we build trails, will Lumina still trust us?" Marta paused, facing the shimmer of the ghost lanterns. "We will move slowly, my love. Every step will honor her lead." He nodded, but the question lingered uncomfortably between them. In the luminous clearing, Lumina and her pack waited, heads lowering in silent greeting. Tomas knelt and offered his palm. The black wolf approached, muzzle brushing his fingers, then turned away to watch the boundaries they had drawn together. That night, Marta lay awake beside her son, torn between the safety the Commission's funds promised and the risk of irreversible change. Social Services' next visit promised more scrutiny. Could their home truly safeguard Thomas in the event of another accident? Could they guarantee workspace for academic lessons and wilderness guardianship both? At dawn, Professor Ruiz arrived with news. Her editor agreed to anonymize the article, removing GPS coordinates but retaining the grove's region. It was a partial victory. Legal filings would reference the larger national park boundary, protecting the core without disclosing it. Marta exhaled, tears of relief and caution mingling, yet even this victory carried the sting of compromise. By midday, Thomas faced the headmistress's decision: return to daily classes or continue the one-day-per-month forest excursions. He closed his eyes, listening for Lumina's call, feeling her soft breath on his sleeve as she padded into the clearing. "I choose both," he whispered. When he opened his eyes, Marta's surprised smile warmed him. "Then we'll work it out. Forest lessons in the grove, academics at home." In the forest, Lumina watched from the shadows as Thomas carefully marked a new trail boundary with biodegradable flags. Her gaze was wary but unafraid, an unspoken test. Thomas halted, heart alight, and lifted a hand in greeting. Lumina padded forward, pausing at the last flag before stepping back. It was both acceptance and caution, the very balance Marta had sought to preserve. As they retraced their steps back to the village, Marta saw the sunset's golden glow filter through the pines, ghost lantern spores dusting the damp earth. The subplots, media frenzy, economic pressures, social services oversight, and wolfpack welfare had not resolved neatly, but the first weave of compromise had begun. Marta slipped her hand into Thomas's and whispered, "We'll protect Lumina's world and ours. one careful step at a time. Thomas nodded, glancing back at the silent trees. In that moment, he felt the forest's pulse align with his own, a rhythm of hope, of balance, and of the enduring lesson that sometimes doing the right thing means finding compromise in the face of impossible choice. A week later, as mist curled between the pines, the fragile peace around the grove began to crack. The newly approved eco-trails were under construction, and Marta watched from the edge of the worksite as heavy machinery ground gravel into paths. Volunteer stewards in green armbands guided hesitant visitors along the designated route. Thomas stood beside them, locket of Lumina's scarf in his pocket, heart clenching each time he saw a tourist stray too close to the lantern ring. That afternoon, a terse message arrived from Professor Ruiz's university. Urgent. Lab findings show ghost lantern spores contain compounds with psychoactive properties in small doses. Concern over public safety. Recommend we issue health advisory. Marta's stomach lurched. If the mushrooms were deemed a public hazard, the grove could be sealed off or worse, quarantined, endangering Lumina's sanctuary. Meanwhile, in the forest's deeper shadows, Jacob Lee and Dr. Patel confronted a different crisis. The black wolf, once limping, now exhibited sudden bouts of disorientation, stumbling over roots, eyes glazed. Blood tests revealed the snare's cut had become infected, requiring antibiotics and possibly long-term treatment. Worse, the pack's alpha sensescape was shifting. Camera traps showed a third adult wolf patrolling the northern fringes, snarling at Lumina's pups and driving them away from the ghost lantern ring. That evening, Marta convened an emergency meeting in the village hall. The benches filled with faces etched by worry. Innkeeper Rossi saw bookings plummet at rumors of toxic mushrooms. Hunter Pietro complained of lost territory. The headmistress fretted over Thomas's sleep-deprived lessons, and Professor Ruiz hovered with her laptop open to the advisory draft. Marta cleared her throat. We face 4 threats, health advisories that could close the grove, Lumina's mate falling ill, a rival wolf endangering her pups, and our eco-tourism model unraveling. We must act now or lose everything. She set her eyes on Santoro, who tapped his pen nervously. Director, can the Forestry Commission expedite antibiotic dispensary in the field and restrict visitor caps until the advisory is resolved? Santoro swallowed. I will consult, but our liability is high. Ruiz stood. I can delay the advisory if we prove concentrations are below risk thresholds, but I need new toxicology data from the spores themselves. Tomas shifted in his seat. May I speak? Heads turned. He rose slowly, voice clear. This grove saved my life. It taught me trust and wonder. If we shut it down, we lose more than mushrooms. We lose Lumina's home and mine. His words landed like stones in water. A hush fell. Santoro exhaled. I'll authorize temporary permits for on-site labs. Strict no-harvest policy. Ruiz nodded gratefully. I'll expedite assays. We'll post health notices asking visitors not to touch or taste any fungi. Marta allowed herself a relieved sigh, but the rival wolf lingered at the edges of her thoughts, a wild card no policy could quell. Late that night, Thomas crept from his bed in the cabin, guided by Lumina's distant howl. He followed the sound past the eco-trail's barricades, where construction lights cast long, spindly shadows. He slipped beneath the tape and pressed on to the ghost lantern circle, where Lumina waited beneath the glowing caps. She pressed a gentle muzzle to his hand, then padded off toward a fallen log. Thomas crouched as Lumina nosed the ground, then emitted a soft whine. In the moonlight, he saw 2 sets of footprints, one belonging to Lumina's mate, now faint and erratic, the other, fresh and deep, belonging to the newcomer. Following the trail, Thomas reached a small clearing where the rival wolf stood over the black wolf's bleeding flank. The newcomer's stance was aggressive, teeth bared. The injured wolf lay helpless. Thomas's breath caught. He stepped forward, voice firm despite the tremor in his chest. Leave him alone! The rival wolf lunged at Thomas, and the boy braced when Lumina sprang between them with a fang-filled snarl. Thomas pressed his hands together, calling softly, Please go. The alpha's ebon gaze flicked to him, calculating. Moments passed like lifetimes. Then the newcomer turned, back arching in disdain, and vanished into the pines. Lumina circled the injured mate, nose wet with worry. Thomas knelt, touching the black wolf's fur. "We'll fix you," he promised. The wolf's eyes met his, a silent plea. He raced back to the cabin, breath ragged, where Marta waited with Jacob, awakened by the commotion. Together, they set out with a first aid kit and their headlamps. Marta loaded the wolf onto a stretcher. Jacob supported Thomas. On the way back, they encountered a line of eco-stewards blocking the trail. Rumors had spread of poachers again. Marta flashed her torch. "It's us, emergency." The stewards parted, whispers in the dark. "What's happened?" Jacob answered, "The Alpha tried to kill him. We need the vet immediately." At the mobile lab's entry, Dr. Patel and Ruiz stood ready. Patel disinfected the wound, while Ruiz collected spore samples Thomas had pressed into a vial. Marta held her son's shoulder as cameras clicked, mistaken for media, but Marta steeled herself. The real story lay in the pack's survival. As dawn broke, the four crises loomed still. Toxicology data pending, injured mate in recovery, rival wolf still free, and villagers divided. Yet in the violet light, Thomas caught sight of Lumina's silhouette on the hillside, silent sentinel, waiting for his next step. He drew a shaky breath and reached for Marta's hand. "We fight for them." She nodded. The labyrinth of challenges ahead would test every promise they'd made, but for the boy who could not see, vision had never been clearer. Protect the wolves, protect the forest, protect the wonder, no matter the cost. The following morning, an uneasy stillness hovered over the village. Word spread that Professor Ruiz had fast-tracked the toxicology report. Ghost lantern spores contained trace psychoactive alkaloids only when ingested in large quantities, far above levels encountered by casual contact. The advisory would recommend observe, don't disturb, rather than quarantine. Relief washed through Marta as she read the email. The grove would stay open under stewardship, not sealed off. At the Forestry Commission office, Director Santoro signed off on the revised plan. 20 acres of inviolate sanctuary centered on the oak and mushroom mead, with eco-lodges and interpretive centers at the boundary. Construction permits were modified to require low-impact materials and no nighttime work. Santoro placed the file in his drawer with an uncharacteristic sense of satisfaction. "We've found balance," he told his deputy. Across town, the village school issued a new charter for Thomas. Forest Integrated Learning. Once a week, he would lead a small cohort of classmates on guided nature walks, teaching them to identify bird calls and read wolf tracks. In the classroom, he would complete math and reading lessons. The headmistress smiled as Thomas explained ghost lantern ecology to his peers, pride shining in her eyes. Meanwhile, in the mobile veterinary lab, Jacob Lee and Dr. Patel oversaw the black wolf's recovery. The antibiotics had quelled the infection, and his limp was improving. Yet at night, he paced restlessly. Patel suggested social medicine, targeted enrichment and pack interactions to restore his alpha confidence. Jacob arranged supervised introductions back at the grove, where Lumina greeted her mate with gentle nudges. The reunion, captured by remote cameras, melted doubts. The pack bond had endured, strengthening both wolves' resilience. At Marta's cottage, the eco-stewards gathered to rehearse visitor management protocols. They practiced guiding small groups, cleaning up litter during nightly patrols, and responding to emergencies, forest fires, lost hikers, or wolf encounters. Thomas joined them, demonstrating wolf etiquette, no sudden movements, low voices, respect for canine space. The stewards nodded, awed by his ease among the pines. That afternoon, a delegation from the Forestry Commission, forest rangers, epidemiologists, and construction engineers met at the grove's edge. They tested soil compaction, water runoff designs, and lantern-friendly illumination for the boardwalk. Professor Ruiz oversaw sample plots, collecting spores without damaging mycelium networks. Marta and Thomas guided them through the lantern ring, cautioning where foot traffic must be diverted to preserve the fungi's delicate roots. At dusk, Thomas and Lumina met under the phosphorescent caps. He sat cross-legged on the mossy floor, leaning back against Lumina's flank. She rested her head on his thigh, breathing softly. Thomas whispered, "You've changed our world." Lumina's ears twitched in acknowledgement. Then she rose and padded off toward her den. Thomas followed at a distance, ensuring her pups, now robust adolescents, frolicked safely behind her. On the village hall stage that evening, Marta presented a progress report. She displayed charts of visitor numbers, holding steady under the 30-person cap, water quality readings unchanged, and educational outcomes. Thomas's class scored highest in environmental science. She introduced the plan for an annual Night of the Lanterns festival, quiet observation only, no public picking or photography flashes. The crowd, hunters, farmers, teachers and merchants, applauded, united by the shared success of compromise. Yet beneath the applause lay the memory of recent crises, the sparosity of funds, the headmistress's concerns, the black wolf's infection, and the rival alpha's aggression. Marta knew vigilance would never wane. She paused after the meeting, catching Santoro's eye. He nodded, a silent pact that the forest's heart would remain inviolate. That night, Thomas walked home beside his mother under lantern light. Fireflies danced along the trail, and ghost lanterns glowed faintly in hidden patches. He glanced back at the grove, where Lumina's silhouette stood guard. He smiled, feeling the web of connections tighten. Science and tradition, village and wilderness, child and wolf. At home, Marta tucked Thomas into bed. He pressed the ghost lantern scarf to his cheek, inhaling Lumina's scent. "Thank you for staying with me," he whispered to the darkness. Outside, the wind carried a wolf's soft howl, a vow that the grove, the pack and the boy would face the future together. Winter's first freeze settled over the grove, frosting the ghost lantern caps with ice. For a moment, Marta believed the delicate balance they had forged could endure the chill. But beneath the surface, 4 storms were gathering, each capable of shattering their fragile peace. At the Forestry Commission's regional office, Director Santoro faced a heated meeting. A developer from the Eco Lodge Consortium insisted on expanding beyond the agreed boundary. "Visitor demand is growing," the developer argued. "We need more cabins, more amenities, before we lose our window." Santoro hesitated. The Commission's charter emphasized sustainability, yet political pressure loomed to boost local revenue. A vote was called. The proposal failed by a single swing, Santoro's own. He left the room shaken, knowing that one misstep would tip the village back toward unchecked commercialization. Back in the village, the Night of the Lanterns festival drew record crowds. Over 50 visitors pressed against the trailhead before dusk. Despite stewards' efforts, trampling and noise rose to dangerous levels. Thomas guided one group, voice-weary, as torch-wielding tourists slipped beyond barriers to snap selfies under the mushroom's glow. "Please stay on the path," he pleaded, echoing Marta's earlier calls. One woman sneered, "We paid for this experience, we'll get our photo." Thomas clenched his jaw but held his ground, ushering her back. His heart pounded. If tourism spiraled further, the grove would collapse under its own popularity. Meanwhile, deep in the forest, Lumina's mate, the black wolf, showed signs of relapse. Dr. Patel's weekly health check revealed fresh inflammation in his ribs. He winced at the vet's probe, and a low whimper echoed against the trees. Jacob studied the wolf's gait and frowned. "He's overexerting himself chasing off rival wolves," he said. "If we don't intervene, he could rupture those ribs and then none of this matters." Lumina watched, tension rippling through her frame. Tomas's heart ached. The wolf he had freed now risked life and limb defending her home. At school, the headmistress delivered an ultimatum. Thomas's forest lessons would end unless he passed his midterm exams. With the festival preparations and vigil duties, his studies had slipped. Marta felt torn: push Thomas back into academics, or risk losing his exceptional learning plan. An emergency parent-teacher meeting loomed. Its outcome could remove Thomas's weekly grove access. Marta paced the edge of the grove's boundary that night, lantern in hand. Beside her stood Thomas and Jacob, each grappling with their own fears. Marta spoke first. "We can't fight these 4 pressures separately any longer. They converge here tonight." A distant call split the air, a wolf's scream of pain, Lumina dashed past them toward the forest's heart. Marta, Thomas, and Jacob followed, hearts pounding. They found the black wolf at the grove's northern edge, snarling at the rival alpha as frost-bitten branches crunched beneath them. Lumina stood between the two males, hackles raised in defiance. Jacob knelt beside the injured wolf. "He's bleeding," the vet whispered, pressing a coolant-soaked pad to the wound. The rival wolf lunged, teeth bared, but Lumina leapt to intercept, fangs flashing. Thomas sobbed, "Stop fighting!" He raised his lantern, its soft glow illuminating the trio of wolves. "We don't want more blood." Slowly, the wolves froze, noses quivering in the light. The rival backed off a step, then slipped into the shadows. Lumina approached her mate, nudging his flank. He closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. Marta placed a steadying hand on the vet's shoulder. "We need a permanent solution." Marta turned to Jacob and Thomas. "We must relocate the black wolf to a safer territory, away from rivals." Jacob shook his head. "But Lumina's pack will suffer without him," Thomas interjected, voice hushed but resolute. "Then we must protect both, make their home unassailable." Marta frowned. "But how?" "The commission won't sanction year-round wardens. The school won't excuse further absences. The festival is next week." Thomas raised his lantern higher. Its glow caught drifting spores, each a tiny beacon. "We build a living barrier, plant ghost lanterns along the grove's edge. Their glow at night deters intrusion, and a sacred grove's electricity humbles even developers." Marta's eyes widened. Could the mushrooms themselves become guardians? At first light, Marta met with Elder Marcello and the village council. She unrolled a hand-drawn map. "We plant ghost lantern spores along the perimeter, creating a luminous boundary," she explained. "At night, the glow will enter proposals as a ritual. No-go zones for tourists, development, even rival wolves. The community pledges to tend them." The council murmured. Hunters nodded. "I won't pass through a field of glowing mushrooms." The headmistress smiled. "My students will maintain the spore beds as part of their curriculum." Santoro, summoned for emergency, studied the plan. "It's unconventional," he said, "but it respects both economics and ecology. I approve." As the sun set, Thomas and classmates planted tiny plugs around the grove's circumference, guided by the elders and stewards. Lumina watched from the thicket, her amber eyes reflecting the soft, spreading light. Marta stood beside Thomas, tears gleaming in her eyes. "You've given her a fortress of light." Thomas placed his hand on Lumina's flank. "We protect you, as you protect me." The rival alpha's howl echoed once, distant and uncertain, an acknowledgement of the new boundary. In the hush broken only by the children's whispered chants, the grove pulsed with living light, a testament to human cooperation, wild resilience, and a community's willingness to adapt. The day the first ghost lantern plugs took root around the grove's perimeter, tension coiled in every corner of the village. Marta rose before dawn to inspect the fragile seedlings, dew clinging to translucent caps. She traced the luminous ring that now glowed softly in the half-light, a living fence of bioluminescent guardians. By mid-morning, Director Santoro convened a high-stakes meeting at the Forestry Commission. He faced the Eco-Lodge developer and village representatives, including Marta, Elder Marcello, and Professor Ruiz. The developer slammed his briefcase shut. "This barrier is unsightly and limits my investment. We have a binding contract for 20 acres. I demand access." Santoro inhaled and held up a hand. "Your contract remains, but only outside the luminous boundary. Any intrusion on the inner grove violates local ordinance and will incur heavy fines." The developer's jaw clenched. "Fines don't stop determined investors." Marta stepped forward, voice calm but clear. "This boundary is born of the forest itself. The mushrooms we planted are protected under the National Fungi Act. Any damage risks criminal charges." Marcello produced copies of the new ordinance, complete with scientific appendices from Ruiz's lab and community signatures. "We stand ready to enforce it," he added. The developer scowled but fell silent. Meanwhile, at the school, the headmistress delivered hard news. "Tomas's integration plan is impressive, But his grades are slipping again. The council threatens to suspend forest trips entirely. Marta's heart sank. He needs both academics and the grove, she argued. The headmistress shook her head. I'm bound by policy. Marta drew a breath. Then I propose forest lessons count for multiple credits. Let him lead a curriculum unit on ecological stewardship. The headmistress's stern expression softened. If the board approves, yes. Marta exhaled. Another compromise secured. In the forest's shadows, Jacob Lee readied the veterinary team for a final check on Lumina's mate. The black wolf padded into the makeshift clinic, steady but wary. Jacob examined healed ribs and gave the green light for full reintegration. As the mossy gate swung open, Jacob and Dr. Patel guided the wolf back toward Lumina's den. Suddenly, a tracer flare arced overhead. Eco-tourists from the festival site had strayed beyond the boardwalk and ignited a small fire with a lantern mishap. Smoke curled toward the grove, wind carrying sparks into the ghost lantern circle. Marta, alerted by the smoke detectors on her phone, raced into the forest accompanied by 2 stewards. They arrived to see tourists scrambling to douse flames licking at the undergrowth. Marta shouted, "Stay back!" Lumina dashed in, ears flattened, and with fierce growls drove the burning tourists away from the fragile fungi. Thomas, following his mother's warning through the haze, knelt beside a steward to stomp out embers, while the stewards formed a human chain to pass buckets of water from the nearby creek. As the last spark died, silence settled amid smoky air. Marta's heart pounded. "I told you," she gasped to the steward captain. "This grove demands respect." The steward solemnly nodded. "We'll double patrols and ban any open flames in the perimeter." At the Forestry Commission, news of the fire reached Santoro as he signed off on the final eco-lodges. His phone buzzed with the emergency alert. He drummed his fingers, then called an immediate press conference. The developer's detachment faded. "Your development is suspended," Santoro announced. "We will review new safety protocols and luminous barrier best practices before any construction resumes." The developer stormed out, rage etched on his face. Marta knew this was their last victory, but that the final test still lay ahead. That evening, Thomas led a delegation of classmates and stewards on the first official guided lantern walk. They moved in single file along the low-impact boardwalk, cameras off, voices hushed. Thomas paused where ghost lanterns glowed brightest. "This ring protects our future," he said into the hush. "It teaches us that nature's boundaries demand our honor." Behind the group, a crack in the darkness revealed the rival Alpha, drawn by the light, watching from afar. Lumina emerged at Tomas's side, nose nudging his hand as though to remind him of the delicate alliance they'd forged. The Alpha lurked but did not approach. The luminous barrier held a magic that even wolves respected. At the mobile lab, Jacob and Dr. Patel reviewed the latest wildlife health data. All wolves, including the rival Alpha, showed no signs of renewed conflict or infection. "The barrier is working," Jacob smiled. "It's signaling safe territory." Patel nodded, eyes bright. "And it keeps visitors alive, too." As the last festival lights dimmed across the village square, Marta stood beneath the oak with Thomas. Frost coated the lantern caps, and the ring glowed pale blue. Elder Marcello joined them, flanked by Santoro and Professor Ruiz. Santoro cleared his throat. "Today we witnessed the boundaries' power, economic, educational, and ecological interests united behind a living fence. I commend this community's resolve." Ruiz produced a final slide, an interactive map of the sanctuary, studded with future research stations and educational nodes. "The grove has become a blueprint for human-wildlife coexistence," she said, smiling at Thomas. "All thanks to your courage." Marta placed a hand on her son's shoulder. "You led us," she whispered. Thomas met Lumina's amber gaze across the clearing. The wolf dipped her head, a silent benediction. In the hush beneath the oak, forest and village alike held its breath, knowing the real climax was on the horizon, when humanity and wilderness would stand side by side to face whatever came next. A late winter gale swept through the grove, rattling the fragile caps of the ghost lanterns and sending a swirl of phosphorescent spores across the boardwalk. Marta tightened her cloak against the wind, standing beside Thomas and Professor Ruiz as they awaited the final stage of the Night of the Lanterns festival, an event meant to celebrate their living barrier and the bond between human and wolf. Behind them, eco-stewards lined the trail, lanterns raised high. Across the clearing, Lumina and her mate stood alert, flanked by the rival Alpha just beyond the luminous ring. The wolves' tense postures mirrored the villagers' own nervous anticipation. All eyes were on the boundary where light met shadow. Suddenly, a chorus of distant howls rose above the wind, not just from this pack but from dozens of wolves echoing through the hills, a convergence no one expected. Thomas's heart thudded. The sanctuary's scent markers and luminous barrier had drawn in surrounding packs. Now, under the veil of night, wolves of every stripe were converging on the grove to claim territory or to challenge it. Professor Ruiz gasped. Their territories overlap here. They sense the safe haven. Marta raised her voice. Stay calm. Do not approach the ring. But the eco-stewards wavered as the howls grew louder, some wolves slipping across the threshold despite the glowing fence. A small pup darted between visitors, causing chaos as families scattered. Lanterns dropped, flames flickering perilously close to the mushrooms. Thomas sprang forward, shouting, "Stay back! Follow my path." He led a human chain, voices raised in unison, guiding startled visitors away from the encroaching wolves toward safe ground. Marta and Marcello organized stewards to herd the crowd, while Jacob and the veterinary team readied tranquilizer darts, though none wished to sedate in this sacred space. Above the din, Santoro appeared at the head of the boardwalk, megaphone in hand. He bellowed instructions. "To the perimeter shelters. Now, rangers, contain. Conservationists, stand by." His voice cut through the chaos like a beacon. At the grove's center, Lumina confronted the rival Alpha. The two wolves circled each other, hackles erect, snarls reverberating. The rival charged, but Lumina leapt aside, then pinned him in a fierce struggle. Thomas moved closer, risking a misstep on slippery boards. "Stop!" he shouted, voice raw. To everyone's astonishment, the rival froze, ears flattening as he recognized the boy's presence and the barrier's unspoken authority. Silence fell. The pack's howls tapered off to cautious whimpers. One by one, the wolves fell back, yielding to Lumina's dominance and the glowing ring's power. Marta exhaled in relief, tears stinging. The rival Alpha, once a threat, now sat submissive beside Lumina, who nuzzled him in acceptance. But a new threat loomed. Tender seedlings of the ghost lanterns were crushed beneath panicked hoof and paw. Professor Ruiz rushed forward, gathering intact plugs to replant. Marta knelt, tenderly covering broken caps with moss. Tomas joined her, guiding villagers to help. Together, they wove reeds into protective cages around the most vulnerable patches. Meanwhile, Jacob and Dr. Patel attended the injured pup that had slipped through. A swift field treatment stabilized the pup's wound, but it needed relocation back inside the protective barrier. Jacob hoisted the pup gently, nodding to Thomas. "Your turn," he said. Thomas tucked the pup close, reciting soft reassurance he'd learned from Lumina's own manner. He stepped across the glowing line, fearless in that magical boundary, and delivered the pup back where it belonged. Above, the pack's howls now transformed into a resonant chorus of acceptance, wolves pressing noses together in a majestic communion. Marta watched, heart swelling, as Lumina led her family back within the luminous fence, guided by the very mushrooms she had been entrusted to protect. At the edge of the crowd, Director Santoro lowered the megaphone. "Let this be a lesson. When humanity honors nature's boundaries, even the wildest creatures find peace." The villagers, drenched in snow and spores, erupted into subdued applause, gratitude shining in their eyes. In the hush that followed, Thomas stood barefoot on the frosted boardwalk, the locket of Lumina's scarf in his hand, the pup cradled against his heart. Marta knelt beside him, arms wrapped around her son. Above, the ghost lanterns glowed brighter than they ever had, an emblem of unity forged in crisis. Now, as both human and wolf camps hold their breath, the true climax approaches. Will this fragile accord endure the next dawn's trials? The first pale rays of dawn filtered through the frost lace of pine boughs, illuminating the ghost lantern's faint glow like a halo around the grove. Exhausted villagers, stewards, scientists, and rangers stared in awe as the wolves, Lumina, her mate, the rival Alpha, and their pups, stood in solemn array within the luminous ring. The boardwalk, scarred by the previous night's panic, lay silent under fresh snow. Director Santoro stepped onto the central platform, breath visible in the cold air. He raised his voice so all could hear. "Last night, we witnessed fear and wonder side by side," he said, eyes sweeping the assembly. "Today, we must choose commerce or covenant, short-term gain or long-term guardianship." His gaze landed on the Eco-Lodge developer, who stood sheepish among his peers. A hush fell. The developer swallowed and nodded, out of options. "I withdraw my expansion proposal," he declared, voice firm. "This sanctuary remains inviolate." Applause rippled across the crowd, tempered by the gravity of what had just been spared. At Santoro's side, Marta felt Tomas's small hand slip into hers. She squeezed gently, drawing strength from his unwavering gaze as he looked toward Lumina's pack. The rival Alpha and Lumina's mate stepped forward, muzzles touching in silent truce. The pack's howl rose, a single resonant note that echoed off distant ridges, carrying a message of peace. Suddenly, a crack of ice sounded beneath the boardwalk. All eyes swung to where visitors and officials gathered. A steward knelt to test the planks. Safe. But the moment underscored how delicate their accord remained. Marta exhaled, whispering to Tomas, "We did it, but we'll always have to care." In the center, Professor Ruiz lifted her notebook. "The revised sanctuary ordinance and the living boundary of ghost lanterns are now models for global conservation," she announced, voice vibrant with triumph. She gestured toward the luminous fungi, science and tradition working in harmony. High above, a lone eagle wheeled over the pines. Thomas pointed skyward, wide-eyed. "Guardian spirits," he breathed. Marta nodded. "We'll protect them, as they protect us." As the wolves melted back into the moss-carpeted clearing, rangers quietly removed the remaining snow chains from the boardwalk. Visitors followed their example, stepping gently, offering bows to the pack before retreating. In that delicate dance of respect, the final barrier between two worlds fell away, replaced by a fragile, living bridge. In the days that followed, the grove thrived under its new guardianship. The luminous ring of ghost lanterns pulsed each night, marking the boundary between human curiosity and wild sanctuary. Visitors now arrived in carefully limited numbers, guided by eco-stewards who recited Thomas's words, "Observe, don't disturb." At the village council, Santoro reported that tourism revenues had stabilized at sustainable levels, funding both the clinic and school expansions. The Eco-Lodge developer, once eager to carve through the forest, now sponsored conservation workshops and donated part of his profits to the Sanctuary Fund. In a display of renewed purpose, he affixed a plaque at the boardwalk entrance, "Protector of the Grove, a community's covenant with nature." School days took on a new rhythm for Thomas. His forest-integrated learning program flourished. Each week, a small cohort of classmates accompanied him to the grove, learning to read animal tracks, identify edible plants, and appreciate the wolves' place in the ecosystem. His headmistress beamed as his classmates achieved top marks in environmental science, proudly displaying projects titled Lumina's Legacy and the Ghost Lantern Guardians. Back in the mobile veterinary lab, Jacob Lee and Dr. Patel conducted bi-weekly health checks on Lumina's pack. The once injured mate now ran without a limp. The rival Alpha became a valuable subject for studies on pack social dynamics and conflict resolution. Their work yielded papers in leading journals, documenting how empathetic human intervention could heal wounds, both physical and social, in wild populations. Professor Ruiz deepened the scientific collaboration, establishing a discrete research station just outside the sanctuary boundary. Her team published findings on the ghost lantern's biochemistry, demonstrating how indigenous knowledge could guide modern conservation. Grants flowed in, funding scholarships that allowed villagers to train as citizen scientists, ensuring local stewardship for generations to come. Marta's heart swelled with pride each time she passed the boardwalk's visitor center, where her own photograph, taken by a steward during the Night of the Lanterns, hung alongside Thomas's. The caption read, "When compassion lights the way." She would pause and smile, remembering the fear and hope that had carried them through that decisive night. But life in the grove remained vigilant, not complacent. Wildfires in a distant valley sent smoky haze drifting over the lantern caps one summer. Stewards quickly organized fire breaks and water tank crews to protect the fungi. A harsh winter saw snowdrifts block the boardwalk. Villagers and rangers banded together, shoveling paths while the wolves watched curiously from beneath the lantern glow. Each crisis tested their covenant anew, and each time they passed. Perhaps the greatest testament to their success came years later, when Tomas, now a young man, stood beneath the oak tree with his own child at his side. The boy, hearing wolf howls echo through the pines, pressed his ears against Tomas's chest. "Will they always be safe?" he asked, eyes bright. Tomas knelt, guiding his son's hand to the luminous fungi. "As long as we remember to walk softly, honor their boundaries, and listen with our hearts, they will be." Behind them, Lumina's descendants padded past, 3 lithe wolves, their amber eyes reflecting moonlight. They paused, observing the father and son with the same trust she once offered Thomas. Then they slipped into the darkness, guardians born of kindness and a glacier-cold night, when a blind boy and a wild wolf had forged a bond that changed a community's fate. If this story of a boy, a wolf, and a luminous forest touched your heart, please subscribe for more tales of extraordinary bonds between humans and the wild. Give us a like to show your support, share in the comments which animal has inspired you the most, and don't forget to watch our next video where we explore another remarkable journey of compassion and courage. Together, let's keep the light of understanding and respect glowing bright.